Joining me today in studio is a grain researcher who, even after retiring, has become one of the most influential voices within the agricultural sector. This can only be Dr. John Purchase, the former CEO of Agbiz. Currently, he heads up both the Maize Forum as well as the Wheat Forum, and that's what he will be discussing with us today. Dr. Purchase, good day.
Good morning, Susan.
First of all, let's start and ask, are these types of forums still needed and relevant in 2023?
Yes, absolutely. In a free market system, you need rules and regulations. There are so many cross-cutting issues in the industry, in the value chain, that need to be addressed. So the forum is a collection of all the major role players, from the input suppliers through to the producers, the grain silo industry, the millers, the bakers, and even the consumer union, National Consumer Union. The consumers are represented, and obviously government also. We must remember that there are so many laws and regulations that control or regulate the industry, and we also have to interact with government around these. I think there are about 60 laws just within the Department of Agriculture alone. So obviously not all of them have an impact on the grain industry, but many do, like Act 36 of 1947, or the GMO Act, or the Agricultural Product Standards Act, and we can keep on mentioning them. Also, we have to look at those critical issues which undermine the competitiveness of our industries, both of maize and wheat, and especially maize is the cornerstone of food security in South Africa, not just from a staple food situation for white maize, but also with the yellow maize going into so many high value chain industries like the red meat industry, the pork industry, or the broiler industry, dairy industry. And so maize is so critical to us. As wheat, I'm not saying wheat is not that critical, but we are a net importer of wheat. But if we want to maintain our competitive edge and be able to export 3 million tons of maize every year across the world, then we have to make sure that we have our ducks in a row, and everybody in the value chain is playing its role in ensuring this competitiveness. Now, you might ask, what is competitiveness? It's your ability to put your product on the international market at a price equal to or lower than the international price and still make profit. So there are many things, like logistics is one that's very pertinent now with the Transnet issues, both on the rail and on the port, where we have to address those because those are undermining our competitiveness. But there are very many other examples that I can mention.
And okay, so you're saying that the role players, we need the grain industry, we have role players from there, the red meat industry. Does it mean that those representing bodies from organized agriculture are part of these forums?
Oh yes, absolutely. So for example, on the input side, let's start with that. You have CropLife that do the agrochemicals. You have Sansor, which is a very active member, which represents the seed companies. Because when they're breeding seed and new varieties, they must make sure that the maize that we use has the right quality and the right yields, and that we've increased our productivity to be competitive on the international market. For example, in maize, is just in the last 20 years, our yields have increased on average from 2 tons per hectare to over 5 tons per hectare. Now that productivity increase is what makes us competitive. So the seed breeders and the seed companies are incredibly important. Then you can go to fertilizer, your fertilizer industry. The grain farmers, Grain SA, is very involved in these, as is Agbiz Grain for the grain silo industry. As is the traders, Sekota, because they got to make the market work. So all the role players, right up to the consumer, are represented and participate in the forum. So the forum has two main functions. One, looking at all these cross-cutting issues, and developing plans to engage government and other role players. But the other one is also looking at the innovation part of it, research. So that's through the Research Trust. There's the Maize Trust, but there's also the South African Winter Cereal Industry Trust, and they fund projects, research projects, either from in terms of breeding or in terms of food safety. I think of the mycotoxin panel in terms of maize. So there are various industry bodies too that they have to fund. And a good example is the South African Grain Laboratory, which monitors the crop quality of South Africa. The document that they produce annually is a brilliant marketing document because it shows the buyers across the world what the quality of our South African maize is. And then also South African Grain Information Services. These are also industry bodies established by all the industry role players to make sure that we have the top, best information in our market. A free market can only function if you have equal information for all the role players, the buyers and the sellers, etc.
I'm very interested. You mentioned the ports, which is a constant headache for everybody. Can you perhaps elaborate what the forum has done over the past year, the forums, to help enable in and outflow of traffic at the ports?
Yes, there are bodies that are structured with government from organised business. And we must also remember everything that we do within the forum also rolls up into the agricultural and agro-processing master plan. So there's a bigger design structure as to how these must work. And the master plan is basically a compact between business, private sector, organised agriculture, and government, and civil society, and the labour. And so what we are trying to do is, and through organised business, we have three major areas that we are talking to government. We are seconding people into that. The one is logistics, the one is energy security, and the one is crime and corruption. So those are the three key areas. So Agbiz, for example, sits on the logistics side of it, and it rolls up in there. But we are not limited to just that avenue in terms of looking at the ports, and especially the railways is actually where the biggest problem is. The ports are so working. We're on capacity. Bringing in or opening up on the Maputo line is helping, but on the major problems that we have, especially at the border post there. But we're on the rims in terms of capacity, and we've seen it also in the grain industry this year with the Durban port bringing in wheat and taking out maize. We have no error or room to maneuver if we run into a problem. In fact, we do get delays. So we are constantly engaging with government around these issues, and it's been in the news so many times already. Especially Sakota, the traders, because they're the guys that are the direct clients of Spoornet and Portnet and Transnet in general, but also from other entities like the big grain cooperatives and businesses. They're also engaging to make sure that our logistics works, for example. But this is just one example of why we need to work together to overcome these major obstacles undermining our competitiveness.
Okay. And just for greater clarity, we have the Wheat Forum, we have the Maize Forum, and then we have the Maize Trust and the Wheat Trust. How do these bodies differ from each other? Okay,
I sit on the Maize Trust still. So they work very closely together. Let's first just look at the maize. In the Maize Trust deed, it very emphatically says that the Maize Trust must consider the recommendations from the Maize Forum or Maize Forum Steering Committee. Now, the Maize Forum Steering Committee has two subcommittees, the one on trade and the logistics issues, which I mentioned, and the other one on technical issues, which is the research, etc., and the innovation. Now, we get, and also transformation. So we develop those within those recommendations, and we get applications from people that need funding to meet the objectives of the trust deed. We vet those for the trust deed when we say we recommend these from industry. Then it goes to the Maize Trust, and they have right to decide, but they generally follow the recommendations of the Maize Forum Steering Committee. Then to fund these projects. So there's very close collaboration, it's structured, and it has to work optimally so that we get the best bang for our buck. In other words, that we're using the funds that we have at our disposal efficiently to make our value chain as efficient as possible. And exactly the same principle is on the wheat industry side. So they also get applications for funding, and again, industry is involved in advising them as to what is the best way to spend that money.
Wonderful. Now, John, it sounds very exciting, and I've known you for a long time, and I know you can move mountains, but we also sit with a lot of frustrated farmers, people who might work in agriculture outside of farming. What would your advice be for those individuals? How can they become a part of this big movement and not feel so alone?
Yes, absolutely. I think one must understand not everybody can sit there, although the Maize Forum is open to any person who wants to be there. But that's why we work on the basis of representation or representativity in agriculture. So you organize structures in agriculture like a Grain SA or Agbiz Grain or a Fertasa or a Sansor or a Zakota or a Chamber of Milling or a Chamber of Baking. All these entities are incredibly important. I'm talking now of the value chains within maize and wheat specifically. There are others too in the meat industry, in the horticulture industry. Very important that they become the spokespersons for those farmers or for those businesses that are involved in those industries. The stronger we get these structures and the more representative are, the stronger is our leverage with government, our advocacy in making sure that we get the right policies in place and that we have the right system in place to be competitive on the international market.
Thank you very much. That was Dr. John Purchase talking to us a bit more about the function and role of both the Maize and the Wheat Trust.